Hey everybody, it's Ditkaz, and today's video is on the end of the winter 2024 anime season, and I'm going to give my final thoughts and rankings on the 16 shows that I watched. There's going to be some spoilers for these shows, so if there's anything that you don't want spoiled on, you're going to have to keep an ear out so that you can skip past that part of the video, or just wait to watch this video until after you're all caught up on the shows that you're worried about. With that out of the way, we're going to just get started, starting with the bottom of my list at number 16. Alright, first up we have Sengoku Yoko. And this is one of the two Wednesday shows that I said in a previous video were the shows that I was least excited to watch week to week, and that really didn't change even by the end of the season. And of the two, Sengoku Yoko is the one that's, in my opinion of it, improved the least by the end. And realistically, the character designs are decently interesting, for the main cast at least, but the overall animation really wasn't anything special in my opinion. There were some really cool colors, especially to like the various battle effects when they have like the battle auras or the different mystical abilities they use. Those are colored very well and it does stick out, but that's one aspect of it, and the rest of it just really doesn't stand out much to me at all. The very ending of the show did have a kind of interesting cliffhanger with the main cast all kind of going their separate ways or being separated one way or another, partially because of what happens to the main character Jinka and the character Shinsuke being injured. So Tama ends up kind of going off on her own there. But I really do feel invested in Shinsuke's arc of all of them. I think he's the most interesting character to me. So I want to see where that goes going forward, as they have already confirmed that there's going to be another arc airing in the summer. Even though this was my least favorite show of the season, I've already watched all of it at this point so far. So I feel invested now, and I will be watching the next arc that airs in the summer. And I'm hoping that the show can improve more so that it goes from being just kind of passable to me to being something that I like genuinely really enjoy and look forward to week. Next up at number 15, we have Metallic Rouge. This was the other Wednesday show, so it being down at the bottom isn't really surprising just because of the way that went really most of the season for me. But Metallic Rouge definitely had a stronger finish than Sengoku Yoko, in my opinion. The animation in this show is great pretty much the whole way through, and the various Neian android characters that have kind of like combat suit forms, like mech suit looking things, they all look very distinct and really cool designs. So it was actually kind of a letdown that more of them didn't feature more prominently in the show, as there's only like a couple of them that really are in the show throughout its entire run, and you get to see them in action like a whole lot, and all the rest of them you just kind of like real brief scenes here or there, like towards the end of the show. There was a big twist reveal in the penultimate episode of the show that showed who was actually pulling the strings the whole time, and it's like, okay, it's actually the guy who's kind of like the father of the people that were said to be the bad guys at the beginning of the show, as well as the main character, because he was like helped fund their creation and kind of helped with like the research to create these specific Neians or whatever. And he like turned himself into a Neian so that he can enact this weird grand plan or something. I don't know. It's a little weird. It's kind of done all right, but I'm kind of indifferent on that twist in general. But in the final episode, the main character Rouge does get like a new form that looks a lot different than her original form, and it's actually really cool. So it's kind of a letdown that she didn't get to see more of that form, especially because the final frames of the show show Rouge using that form to seemingly fight a war against an entire invading alien species by herself. And I think that storyline could be really cool to see, but sadly I'm going to assume that we're not going to get to see something like that with its own series, as much as I would probably like that way more than the way this show went down. Who knows? Who knows what the future brings? At number 14, we have The Strongest Tanks Labyrinth Raids. This show stayed decently wholesome throughout its entire run, even though it does have kind of some dark themes underneath it. With things like the demon lords, kind of some of them trying to destroy the world, and the one is making like homunculi that look like humans for combat, and he kind of mistreats them, treats them like slaves, and then those homunculi are kind of looked down on and with fear by regular humans until they kind of get to know them and see that they're just like them. They just want to survive. The animation in the show never really stands out much. It's kind of bland especially compared to a lot of the other shows this season. Even though some of the characters do have some interesting design concepts. The overall premise of the show I thought was really interesting, but the pacing I felt was off. I think it was a little too fast paced for my opinion. I think it could have been slowed down to really develop the characters more. And I think it would have felt like an overall better show if what they had was spaced out more, maybe into 2 seasons. So like I said, you can kind of get more, because there are a lot of characters in this show and they get like the briefest hints at like getting to kind of develop them a little bit more and see them and really give them their time to shine. And it doesn't really ever feel like it's quite enough for especially some of the characters more than others. I do also wish the combat sequences were a little more fleshed out. I feel like they're very bland in a lot of cases. There's not much detail. They're super basic. And a lot of times it kind of cuts them off with like, in terms of the amount of motion in them, where it just ends up being more still frame looking things with like effects going on in the background. And then it's just done with that like sequence of the fight. All right, next up we have at number 13. This is going to be one that I definitely disagree with a lot of other people, or a lot of people are going to disagree with me on this one, I'm sure. I have Solo Leveling. I've said it numerous times in past videos that I feel this show is overhyped, and I think the series in general, like the original webtoon, is a little bit overrated. But I did genuinely enjoy this show this season. I think the characters do look great, and the animation is phenomenal. Especially the fight sequences that are easily the best part of this show, in my opinion. There's some of the better fight sequences I feel like that exist in anime, especially like the Egress fight in the end is great. You can tell a lot of passion, a lot of effort went into that fight scene. I'm not going to deny that. That being said, something about this series that I really don't like is the fact that I don't think Jinwoo needed to undergo such a drastic appearance change. But I do understand that's how it happens in the original webtoon, and the show just kind of followed along with that. So that's just a gripe with the series in general. That being said, the anime is very faithful to the original webtoon, based on the things that I remembered as I was reading the webtoon and watching the anime kind of in the same time. The biggest difference being like the number of characters that are present at different events, and the fact that Cha Hai-in doesn't really feature in the original webtoon at this point. Like they kind of show a silhouette of her early in it, but they never actually show all of her details or have her doing any real speaking. By my estimation, the next season should be pretty good story-wise too for Solo Leveling, with the anime not really getting to the point where I feel like the story starts kind of falling off in quality until a possible season 3, maybe 4, depending on the pacing overall. But eventually, in my opinion, the storyline of this series does kind of start taking a bit of a nosedive in like the second half especially. All right, at number 12, we have Buchigiri. And this show was really kind of crazy. From the first episode, the main character says that he wants to lose his virginity, and he sticks to that pretty much throughout the entire show, despite the fact that all the guys around him are trying to pull him into these school gang fights and succeeding most of the time. The show has a very distinct art style, in my opinion, and all of the characters really do a good job of carving out a good space for themselves to stand apart and be easy to tell apart, even if you can't remember their names. There's also like this really funny little bit they keep doing all the time where their school teacher is standing outside this thing that is kind of implied to almost be like a brothel, but it's clearly like cat themed. And it's like the whole time it's like, okay, this is just a cat that he's going to pet, right? This isn't like a sex shop. And it turns out in the end, it is a cat that he's going to pet all the time. And he basically abducts the cat and then it runs away. It's a funny bit in the end that really they keep going back to, and it does pretty well and it pays off well in the end. The fights are done really well, and I do think the music is great in this show as well. The main storyline does really ramp up in this show in the last few episodes with a very, very satisfactory ending, in my opinion. And the fact that the last frame of the show shows the genie that they assumed was kind of just gone, had like passed on basically, reattaching itself to Origin after he throws like the bullet that initially gets lodged in him from like ricocheting around. He throws it in the ocean and it ricochets off a bunch of random stuff and ends up in his head again, and the genie's still there like, oh, you called? Is actually the culmination of a really funny bit, just the way it works out, in my opinion. And it sets it up to where you could see more storyline, I guess, for this show, even though I assume there's not going to be another season. I would take more of this show in a heartbeat if they make more, but I'm also really content with the way the show ended as it is. The only thing about this show that I was really confused by was the main character's best friend, Matakara, and how previously I could have sworn the show said that his brother did die in the hospital when they were trying to like deal with his wounds after he was stabbed the day he was supposed to be leaving juvie. But then in the ending of the show, it shows him sitting with him in the hospital, and his brother's hand twitches, so it's implied that he kind of pulled through. I must have misunderstood or misread the subtitles, and it must have just said that he looked like he wasn't going to pull through, so it left that door open, and I just assumed that they said that he did die. So in general, you can kind of say that Matakara maybe overreacted and kind of like let himself get a little too depressed, hearing that his brother was probably going to die instead of waiting for him to confirm be dead before acting the way that he did, which would have kind of changed the way things played out in the last couple episodes of the show. But all around, it was still a very entertaining show, and I enjoyed it a lot. At number 11, we have Stupid Angel Dances with the Devil. And the very beginning of this show went a little bit different than I thought it was going to, with the devil character Akutsu basically getting put into a slave collar by the angel Lily. Other than that, the show pretty much went how I expected, with it being a very well done rom-com with the two main characters trying to make the other fall for them. The segments in particular with the cat and dog-headed characters kind of in their head boxing, representing this mental warfare between the two to like get the other to, fall and try this, take this, take this. I thought was really well done every time they did it on screen. It was a really funny dynamic and an interesting way of like showcasing that without directly having it, them actually saying these things as they're trying to, present themselves as, prim and proper while they're like flirting with each other and doing things to try to make them fall. I also thought the ending of the show was very interesting, with Akutsu awakening to a new power, and it was something I was hoping to see earlier in the show, something I thought maybe was going to be there the whole time. I thought he was going to be more on the level with Lily in terms of power scaling instead of just getting dominated by her in the first episode. So I'd really, really hope that we get more of this show, and that we get to see him really master the use of this true form, since seemingly there would be more conflicts with other angels that don't necessarily like Lily as much. If I had to be disappointed in one thing for this show, it's the very ending, with Lily finding Akutsu laying on the ground outside of his apartment with his female boss on top of him and kind of being startled by the whole thing. So if the show doesn't get another season, we'll never really get a resolution on video in anime form of how that whole thing is resolved. At number 10, we have The Wrong Way to Use Healing Magic. And this was one of the shows I didn't start until a couple weeks into the season, and I thought it was a really, really solid isekai series of the incorrectly summoned subset of the genre. The main character being a healer who gets trained to use healing magic to kind of like keep healing his body while he's working out, and becomes basically like a superhuman who can just pummel people if he needs to fight, I thought is a very interesting concept, and is done incredibly well in this show. All of the characters are pretty interesting, even if the one guy they say is a human definitely isn't. Not looking like this, he isn't. Everything is very well animated, and about the only thing I would really want to see more of from this show is the actual conflict between the demons and the humans that was the whole reason that they summoned the heroes in the first place. Hopefully we get more seasons of this show, so we can see where the story goes next, because where it ended off, it looks like the next arc is going to be super interesting in my opinion. I'll probably be checking out the manga for this show in the meantime. At number 9, we have Tales of Wedding Rings, and this is the other show that I didn't start watching at the very beginning of the season, but I did get caught up on it pretty quickly and kept up with it till the end, and I'm not ashamed to admit that I loved every second of this harem isekai series. Other than the main character, who is kind of bland and doesn't really stand out compared to many other typical Japanese main characters in anime, all the rest of the characters have a very distinct look, feel, and attitude to them. And I think the story is very well done, even if the pacing is a little bit faster than I would typically prefer. I say that because this pace does actually match pretty accurately with the pacing of the manga that I started reading towards the end of the season. The show's already been confirmed to get a second season, and I'm really excited because the next arc is very interesting, getting the girls more involved in the storyline and making them more useful to the ongoing conflict going on in the future of the series. At number 8, we have Villainous Level 99, I may be the hidden boss, but I'm not the Demon Lord. And like a lot of the shows on this list, and a lot of shows that I watch in general, it's another isekai series, but this one is from the increasingly popular subgenre of being reborn into otome games. A number of recent ones that have revolved around the main character reincarnating as the villainess of an otome game. I've watched one other isekai series that specifically falls under this subgenre, and that was I'm the Villainess, So I'm Taming the Final Boss, that came out last year or the year before, I don't remember exactly. But this show certainly sets itself apart with how overpowered the main character really is, especially compared to everybody else in the world. I've said before that I really love the main character Yumiella's dry delivery and tone of everything that she says, and how she thinks so much different than everyone else, and it causes a lot of like confusion and kind of like makes everybody scared with the way they react to the things that she says and does, like things she thinks is normal, and they're like, that doesn't make any sense, that's terrifying, why would you do that? The show never really failed to make me laugh, and if there ends up being more story to tell, I'm absolutely on board and excited for it. If not, the ending to the show as is pretty satisfactory, and I'd be happy with that as well. At number 7, we have Mashal Season 2, and it's another strong season for Mashal from start to finish. This is another one of those shows that I really just can't help but laugh at just about every gag they throw at you. It's insane to me how well the show pulls off its shtick of having this very, very serious world and a serious backstory with some crazy conflicts going on, and most of the characters are pretty serious, normal characters, including the main cast of friends, even if those characters have their own quirks. But then you have the main character Mash, who's just so unserious, and he just shrugs through everything and breaks all the rules of this world's established order and power balance. And it's just insane to me how well it works. I think it's an incredible series with great animation and a very, very interesting magic system, and I'm super excited to see how the rest of the story goes from here. At number 6, we have Hokkaido Gals Are Super Adorable, and this is an incredible rom-com in my opinion. Yes, it's technically a harem, which I don't have a problem with, but unlike other harem series, the main character clearly has one girl that he definitely is interested in from the beginning, more so than any of the other girls that get introduced later on. I think the animation is great, and I really love all of the characters they've introduced so far. I was annoyed a bit at the end with how Fuyuki is going to study abroad, and they made it out to be this big deal where it was kind of like stressing out the main character because he wasn't going to get to tell her how he felt and that she was just going to be gone, right? And then it's just like, oh, well, I'm only going to be gone for 2 weeks. I felt it was a really crazy buildup for the moment just to be really deflated in that. And I get that it was meant to just kind of be like a really funny gag with like the misunderstanding because she didn't specify that, but it kind of just ended up coming off as a cheap cop-out to me. Other than that, I have no complaints about this show whatsoever and hope we get more and more seasons to see the story through to the end. At number 5, we have The Weakest Tamer Began a Journey to Pick Up Trash. This was one of the cutest series that I've ever watched. It's an isekai, but the main character doesn't really remember their past life. They just know that they have one, and it kind of speaks to them, although the audience never hears what it says, they just hear a ding whenever they say it, and then the main character will kind of like comment on what their past life said to them, so to speak. So it really hasn't impacted the story that much so far. The characters and colors are gorgeous, and the show is really well animated, and the story is very interesting in my opinion. It does start out very dark for that character in general, and has a couple dark bits at the end with it being a whole story with an organization abducting children and selling them off. But the story does end very wholesomely with them kind of rounding up this organization, and as a result of that, the main character really finds their place in the world and gains a whole lot of confidence and finds out that it's okay for them to be starless. This is another show that I'm really excited to see more of, and I will be very disappointed, devastated even, if it doesn't get more seasons in the future. At number 4, we have The Unwanted Undead Adventurer. This was one of the new shows that I was probably the most excited for, and it really didn't disappoint at all. I think the world is really cool and it has a lot of interesting lore left to explore in future seasons, assuming we get some. All of the characters that are introduced, from the main character Rent to his researcher friend Lorraine, who he ends up living with after he becomes an undead, to the blacksmith or the guild receptionist girl, and everyone else in between, I think are all really, really interesting. I also think the power systems in the series are really well done. There's a lot of really good parity between the three systems of mana, spirit, and divinity, but they're simple enough to differentiate from each other. I think the main character is incredibly likable, and by the end of the series, he's in a very interesting spot. I really think it'll be a crime if this show doesn't get more seasons. At number 3, we have A Sign of Affection. And I knew I was gonna like this show, but I didn't think I was gonna become so obsessed with it. Honestly, A Sign of Affection probably would have become my whole personality for a while, if not for a couple of the other shows on this list. The characters and animation are all really great, and the sound design is incredible. The way everything just kind of goes mute sometimes when it's from the main character's point of view, which if you haven't watched the show and aren't familiar, she is deaf. I think it's done really well whenever they have those moments. The main characters of Yuki and Itsuomi are really just great, and seeing the way how they're so cute together and how the way they interact with each other and as their relationship grows, how they change each other and affect everyone around them, really left me looking forward to each new episode week after week after week. The show instantly shot up towards the top of my all-time favorite romance anime list. At number 2, we have Frieren Beyond Journey's End. And this series deserves all of the praise it's gotten during its run. Anyone who says this show is overrated or worse is really just hating on it for its insane popularity, in my opinion. It's just that good of a show. Everything is so beautiful and well animated, from all the characters to the backgrounds, the most casual, simplest character movements to the most intense, magic-filled action sequences. The lore and world building is really incredibly well done, in my opinion, as well, with all the frequent flashbacks to Frieren's past, kind of comparing to the new things that are happening in the present timeline, and like how those things impact what she knows and how she reacts differently from 80 years in the past, or 200 years in the past, or 1,000 years in the past at different times, and how that's impacted her life till now. All the characters are really well done, in my opinion, and even the most minor side characters that have a minimum amount of screen time, I feel like are very well developed and fleshed out for how much time they are involved in the storyline. I think the emotions and themes of the show are incredible, and even if the show somehow falls off in future seasons, I don't think it could tarnish just how great this initial season of Frieren was. I think this could potentially change anime for the better going forward, in my opinion. At number 1, we have Shangri-La Frontier, and while Frieren might actually be the better overall show, Shangri-La Frontier slightly edges it out for me in terms of how much I enjoyed those shows. I think the game world is very interesting with its backstory, and the whole thought of the main character being incredible at video games just because he's played nothing but like trash tier games for years, I thought was something very different. I think it's easily one of the best looking shows that's come out recently, and it's one of the few shows that I feel like its combat animation level is anywhere near Solo Leveling's, in my opinion, this season especially. I think they keep introducing more cool characters and concepts from start to finish, and I'm super excited for the second season of the show coming later in the year. The biggest thing I'd like to see added to the show is some more screen time for the character Rei Saiga, the girl who has a crush on the main character Sunraku. I'd really like to see more of her, see her get to actually maybe even just become friends with the main character, start actually partying with him some more, and get to actually just interact with him on a more normal, confident way, because she's just a really badass character and I think she's cute. All right, that's my ranking and final thoughts about the anime that I watched in the winter 2024 anime season. I'd like to reiterate that I did enjoy all of these shows, just the 2 at the very bottom I enjoyed the least. I was least excited for them, but I don't think any of these shows are bad at all. As I've said before, all the shows that I watch and talk about in these videos, on these lists, are on Crunchyroll currently, since I don't have High Dive. There are plenty of other shows from this season that I plan on watching in the future when I can find the time to watch them later. So if there's a show you really like that isn't on this list, wasn't in this video, it might be on High Dive, or it might be on my watch list on Crunchyroll for later. Still, feel free to leave a comment letting me know if there's something that you think I missed, like how in my previous video, it was brought up that I need to watch The Dangers in My Heart, which I would like to watch at some point when I get High Dive. I hope everybody enjoyed this video, and will give it a like, maybe subscribe to the channel, or leave a comment. As always, for more of my content, you can check me out gaming on Twitch at twitch.tv/Ditkaz. That's Ditkaz. Thanks for watching, and have a great day, everybody.